Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about note-taking best practices. I've gotten a lot of questions about my taking notes, which I've done for decades. In fact, in my video about a really bad college teacher I had, I speculated that that's when I started taking notes because she was so critical of my notes for her class. Now, I get questions all the time and I direct them to two videos I have. One called About My Notes and one called About My Notes Part 2. But for some people, they want more. So I picked one of the questions. This is from MKGM8YL, who asks, I watched both of your note videos. What I was hoping for was more of a best practices videos from 30 plus years of journaling. Did you change your system of journaling? What would you do differently if you had the opportunity to start again? What is worth paying particular attention when writing things down? What you wish you wrote down more of? You mentioned that you note down the date, events, and people. Do you write those down chronologically as they happen during the day or by topic? Do you put reference numbers when an event has a continuation a few days later? How did you select the events you took notes on? Did things seem particularly important or emotional? Personally, I think that person already knows how to take notes because my answer to a lot of those are yes. Yes. If you're watching to this video to find out what the perfect note-taking system is that I've derived after decades of note-taking, I don't have one. I do have what I consider to be some best practices, and I want to talk about it. But if you are thinking about taking notes, don't even watch this video. Here's my suggestion. Start now. Start right now. Don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait for a new project at school or at work. Don't wait till you buy the perfect notebook or the perfect journaling software because you are just going to keep putting off doing it forever. Instead, just start right now. Pick up a scrap of paper and write down some things that happened today. Pick up a notebook you have that you're not using and write in that. Open Notepad on your smartphone and put it in there. It doesn't matter. Just do it. So here are my best practices arranged as coherently as I could do. First of all, whatever you end up doing, I think the most important thing about taking notes is to do it every single day. Because if you do that, your note taking will become a habit. And once it's a habit, you can stop thinking about it. You'll just do it. Now, you can encourage it to become a habit. If you're taking notes on your phone, make it a widget. Widgets are those big things. I don't know if they're on every smartphone, but there's something like it. Maybe it's something you can put on your lock screen. So when you look at your phone, you see it. It's bigger than a regular icon. It's sitting there. It's something you're going to be tapping a lot. So why not make it a big widget? Why not put it on your lock screen? It'll make you see it, use it, and then you're using it frequently, which justifies it being there. If you instead want to take paper notes, leave the journal somewhere you will see it. If there's some place you always sit when you watch TV, leave the journal there. If you take most of your notes at the end of the day, put it on the nightstand next to your bed. If you take most of your notes as they happen, which I highly recommend, carry it with you. I did that. I had people comment on seeing me taking notes or even carrying a special notebook, and I'm like, I'm taking notes. It's not a secret. I take notes. Almost every meeting I had, starting with Fallout, I was writing stuff down. People probably assumed I was writing down, oh, don't forget to schedule this, or don't forget this email, but sometimes writing down a funny thing someone said. That's where the quotes files came from in Fallout and Arcanum and a lot of my later games. If a smartphone and physical doesn't work for you, at least a very minimum on your desktop of your machine, computer, or your laptop or whatever, leave a file sitting on the desktop that you can click on and just write things. At the very minimum, put an icon. If you're using software, put an icon for it on your taskbar so it's very easy to get to and it will remind you to do it. Okay, that's like the most important thing. You're doing it a lot. Now, like I said, I don't think there is a one size fits all journaling technique. And I think you will get trapped not journaling if you think there's one out there for you. I have done it so many different ways. You're just going to have to try this and see what you like doing. And try it for a few weeks. And if you find it's annoying or when you look back on it, there's some problem with it, do it a different way. I have done loose leaf papers that I just write stuff on. The problem I had with that is if I didn't remember to date every one, and sometimes if I did dates but I did multiple notes during the day, I couldn't remember the order they were in. I didn't like that as much, so I switched to a paper journal because at least that you go in order. So if I forget to date a page, I know from the previous and following page, I know a rough idea of when that event happened. I've also used text files, just a text file like on my desktop, and I open it with Notepad. That at least gets time stamped. So if I open it up and I didn't put a date in, I can look in the properties and see when was this file last modified and use that as my timestamp. I've used various journaling software out there. There's a ton of them out there. There was one I tried recently called Obsidian, ironically enough, not anything to do with the company I worked at. And it was interesting. It lets you take notes. It lets you cross-reference them easily. I liked it. I didn't end up using it because it was very difficult for me to use it in different platforms and have them all cloud back up to the same spot. So if they're listening, that's why I stopped using your software. I've even used social media. There were a few years where what I did was on the social media platform I was using, I would make private posts. As soon as something happened, I'd get on and I'd write a post, mark it private just for me, and put it up there. What was nice about that was I could do it right at my desk or on my phone, and it automatically got timestamped. And no one could see it, and I could go back later whenever I felt like it and pull it out and put it in to whatever digitized set of notes I had. It was a simple cut and paste, and then I could delete it. No one ever saw it except me. Who cares? So that was an interesting use of social media for me for a while. And for a while, I was on social media but not posting much from everyone else's point of view. I was posting every day. They just didn't see it. You might not want to overlook doing audio or video note taking. Blogging. You could use blogging or podcasting software. Vlogging. These are bigger files than I would have considered using 20 years ago, but these days, who cares? The only problem I'd have with audio and video, it's probably going to be harder for you to find things later if you also don't have some way of automatically subtitling it in a searchable format. So think about that before you do it. And that gives me the last thing I want to talk about just in terms of what form you do it in. I digitized everything eventually. So whether I had loose leaf papers or a notebook or whatever, I ended up digitizing it because it's just easier to search. If it was a handwritten thing, you will discover OCR, optical character recognition software. It is amazing these days. It can take my printed stuff, even some of my cursive stuff, and anything that is just a if it's typewritten, it can trivially OCR it and basically digitize it. When I had it digitized, because when you digitize it, it would timestamp it with that date. I made sure I wrote in the timestamp that was from the thing that was digitizing. If it wasn't already there, I wrote it in. I also confirmed that I was getting the dates right. And then everything I had is now saved up in the cloud. So if my computer explodes, if I lose my phone or whatever, there is a cloud save of all my notes. Everything going back probably now about 30 years, probably a little more. So that's why when I do videos like the Fallout development timeline or the Temple of Elemental Evil development timeline, that's just me looking at my notes and reassembling everything in order and then doing a video blog about it. Now, as for the content, let's talk about what you actually write down. It's very simple for me to say this, but just write down what happened. Just something happened, write it down. Now, I say write down important stuff. How do you know it's important? If you have a visceral reaction to it, it's very important. And pay attention not just to the negative stuff. Good stuff, too. Somebody finished something 2 days early. Write it down. Repeating stuff. Like this is the day I check in with somebody every week. Write down what they did. This is important because if you're a manager, when you go to do someone's review, whether it's a half year or yearly review, you will often be hard pressed to give them examples. Here's what I think you did well. Here's what I think you could improve. But if you have your notes, just search for their name. Read about stuff. If you see, I consistently gave you things and you always finish them early. I think you're better than you, I think you're faster than you think you are, or you're better at this particular task. If they're sometimes faster and sometimes slower, look to see if you can tell what the difference is and go, hey, I've noticed you're really fast at getting mechanics in and kind of slow at UI. I am too. Just keep that in mind when you're giving estimates that UI takes a little longer than you always think it will. This is stuff people love hearing in reviews. And if you can give concrete examples, if they're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, remember when you were doing inventory? Remember you were doing the quest journal? And then you can say, it took you longer than you thought. I'm not mad. I just think this is something you need to improve. This helps. Another thing when you're doing your content, always try to put the day and date. Always. Try to name who's present. You can always make it anonymous later if you're publicly talking about it. But you can never go back and remember. I have several notes where I didn't write down who said something or who my conversation was with. I just wrote, a designer today went blah, blah, blah. I wish I knew, because whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I wish I could remember who it was who said that. You can, like I said, anonymize it later, but in your notes, write down people's names. Also, try to stick to facts. This is going to be very hard, but my recommendation here is stick to what the person said, what the person did. Do not interpret it. Save that for later. It's like the names. Write down the names, anonymize it later. Write down facts, interpret it later. You will be very, very tempted to interpret things in your notes. You will want to write down, Bob was being vindictive. Mary was upset about this feature. Paul was hangry. Don't write that. You can say, Bob kept bringing up this other person and kept saying he was going to do these things about this person. You could write down, Mary said she didn't like this feature. Mary said she wished we didn't put that feature in and that was going to lead to these problems. You can write down, Paul came in, he said he was really upset about something, but then he's like, you know what, I'm going to go to lunch. He said these things. He talked a certain way. He used words. He was loud. You can write those things down. Once you start interpreting it, it's a problem. And keep in mind, you can always do it later, and you don't even have to do it at all. I think you will like it later that you can write down exactly what people said and did, so that later on when people deny it, and they will, you can say, I don't know what to say. You said that's stupid. Maybe you didn't think that. Maybe you don't remember that. But you looked at me and said that feature is stupid. It's funny. I've had people deny saying things. And I'm like, well, I wrote down that's exactly what you said. And someone else was like, oh, yeah, I was there. That's what he said. And this person's like, I didn't say that. It's like, you may not remember saying that, but you said it. People will get upset with your notes. That's why I'm saying keep them as factual as possible. If you absolutely want to interpret and write down feelings, make a separate journal, diary, or whatever, and put it in there. As long as you put dates in it, you can correlate it. You can find out that made you really mad, or that person seemed angry, but keep them separate. One thing I would highly recommend is don't get bogged down in details. If you decide the best journaling software for you and it doesn't allow cross references, don't stop using it just because of that. If you're using something and you can't insert a photo or a video, don't stop using it just because of that. A common thing I found among people is they would try to journal every day and then they'd forget one day and they just stop. I didn't journal yesterday. I guess I'm terrible at this. I'm going to stop. Just journal today. It's only the next day. Write down some things that happened yesterday. Keep it factual, but write down, oh yeah, I had a meeting with Bob, or I talked to Mary about this feature yesterday. Date it today and say we talked yesterday. Don't give up because you forgot once. This is a perfect example of perfect is the enemy of good. Your notes are not going to be perfect. As I've described here, I've tried different things over the years. The only consistency was dating it, try to use names and actual facts of what people said and did, and then digitizing it. So even if I used paper for years, and I used paper for years, and then I went digital, and then I went back to paper. I just liked having that notebook with me. If you stop because of some slight reason, that's perfect being the enemy of good. You can do a good job note taking. If you're not doing a perfect job, don't stop taking notes. If you think, well, gee, I wish I had cross referencing, start looking at journaling software that has it. But don't stop taking notes until you find it. I think that's all the best practices I can think of. I don't have perfect notes. There are notes of events that I don't have. There are notes where I forgot to date them or write down who was in it. Doesn't make me wish I didn't have the note. Makes me wish I had taken better notes and encouraged me to take better notes when I realized that was happening. So anyway, I hope this gives enough detail to everyone who's asking me about note taking, and I hope you start taking notes today.